There is something unnervingly real about the darkness. It's not just the absence of light. It's the sense that the world around you has changed. That in the quiet, unseen corners of the night, something else is waiting. For most of us, the terror of the dark isn't merely a childhood memory. It's a sensation that lingers into adulthood. A knot in the stomach that tightens when the lights flicker, or when the shadows stretch too far. It's a deep, primitive fear that whispers that something dangerous lurks just beyond the edge of the visible. But where does this fear come from? Why does the absence of light make our hearts race and our minds spin with terror? The answer is rooted deep within our evolutionary history, buried in the very core of who we are. A long time ago, when our ancestors roamed the untamed forests, the night was more than a mere inconvenience. It was a threat, and the dark was not just an empty space. It was a veil, hiding dangers too terrifying to imagine. The ancient world was not kind to the unwary. The dark, stretching over the land like a vast invisible hand, was home to creatures that hunted by the cover of night. Their keen ears and eyes pierced the gloom, while the creatures of the day stumbled and stammered in the darkness, vulnerable to every hidden threat. If you were an early human, just a speck in the grand timeline of life, darkness was a warning. When the sun disappeared behind the horizon, your senses heightened, and your instincts screamed, "Survive!" The air was thick with danger, the absence of light a cloak for predators that stalked the edges of your sight. The moon's silver light, thin as a thread, did little to reveal the lurking creatures in the underbrush. It was a time for silence, for keeping your body still and your ears straining for the sound of danger. The most primal fear, the one that had shaped our survival, was the fear of the unknown. The fear of what you couldn't see, what you couldn't hear. The fear of being utterly defenseless. For our ancestors, the dark wasn't simply the absence of light. It was a veil that concealed everything. The hunter, the predator, the threat waiting to strike. But why, you might wonder, do we still feel it? Why does the fear of the dark linger, even in the modern world where the dangers of the night have long since vanished? It's simple. Evolution doesn't erase ancient fears. It's far easier for the brain to overestimate danger than it is to underestimate it. Our ancestors who feared the dark and acted accordingly were more likely to survive. The ones who didn't, well, they didn't pass on their genes. The fear of the dark is a survival instinct, as deeply woven into our psychology as any other. And it's just as real today as it was when our ancestors huddled close to the warmth of the fire, listening to the sounds of the night, wondering if they'd survive until dawn. The modern world may have its streetlights and its cars, its bustling cities, and its never-ending noise. But at the heart of our fear of the dark still beats a primal rhythm, a nervous tapping in the chest when the lights go out, the hairs on the back of your neck standing on end. This fear, as ancient as our species itself, is rooted in the very structure of our brains. Deep within the folds of your mind, hidden in the core of your brain, is a small almond-shaped cluster of neurons known as the amygdala. It's often called the brain's alarm system, and when it's triggered, you can be sure that something is about to go wrong. The amygdala's job is simple: to keep you safe. But in order to do that, it has to act fast. Really fast. It's a split-second decision maker, making sure you respond to threats before you have time to think. It's the reason you jump when something crashes in the night. The reason you feel that tightness in your chest when the room is too quiet. And when the lights go out, the amygdala kicks into overdrive. The absence of light is an alarm bell to the brain. Darkness, to the amygdala, is a signal that something isn't right, that the world around you has changed. In the absence of sight, the brain scrambles for other ways to understand the situation, heightening your sense of hearing, your sense of touch, making every sound seem louder, every whisper in the wind more menacing. But there's something else, something even darker that happens when the amygdala is triggered. It creates a chain reaction, a rush of chemicals that prepares your body to fight or flee. Your heart rate quickens, your muscles tense, and every sense becomes laser-focused. But while this survival response is essential in the wild, in modern life it often causes more harm than good. In the dark, the brain becomes convinced that there's danger when there might not be any at all. Your eyes strain to see, but they see nothing. Your ears, however, hear everything. The distant hum of a refrigerator, the creak of the house settling, the wind howling outside the windows. To the amygdala, all of these things are signs of something unseen, something lurking, something just out of reach. The chemicals rush through your body and the fear escalates. Your fight or flight response flares even if there is no real danger. It's a mechanism that kept our ancestors alive, but it still haunts us in the night. Darkness, once merely the absence of light, becomes something much more terrifying when the brain struggles to process what it can't see. The sudden loss of visual information forces the brain to rely on its other senses, sound, touch, even smell, all of which become exaggerated in the absence of light. Imagine you're standing in a room, the light's gone out. For a moment there's nothing but silence. Your eyes strain, but they can't make sense of the dark. Your hands twitch, desperate to touch something familiar, but everything feels foreign. In that silence, every little sound becomes a threat. The faint hum of an old air conditioning unit, the soft rustle of your own breath, the small ticking of a clock just beyond the range of your sight. Every sound seems louder, every whisper feels closer. Your brain, now running on heightened alert, interprets these sounds as potential threats. The creak of the floorboards could be someone sneaking up behind you. The rustle of the curtain. What if it's something waiting to pounce? In the dark, the brain doesn't just process sound, it amplifies it. Each tiny shift in the air, each minor vibration in the ground beneath your feet becomes a part of the growing narrative that the dark is hiding something, that something is watching. Something is moving. Your heartbeat races faster, and the fear grows, even though you can't pinpoint the cause. It's a terrible cycle. The more you hear, the more you feel, the more you believe something is there. The brain, though, doesn't always get it right. The noises, the sensations, it's all part of a trick. A trick the amygdala plays on you. The darkness exaggerates the fear, and the fear exaggerates the darkness. There's something profoundly unsettling about fear. It's not just the sudden rush of adrenaline or the pounding of your heart in your chest. It's the way it can consume you. How it can wrap itself around your mind and twist every thought into something dark and twisted. The fear of the dark isn't just about shadows and empty rooms, it's about control. The darkness steals that control from us, and in doing so, it reveals a deep, vulnerable part of ourselves that we're often reluctant to confront. But fear isn't an unmovable force, it's an emotion. And like all emotions, it can be understood, processed, and even conquered. The key to overcoming our fear of the dark lies in understanding why it exists, why our bodies react the way they do, and how we can use that knowledge to reclaim control. It's said that the first step to overcoming a fear is to confront it head-on. But how do you confront something as elusive, as ungraspable as fear itself? How do you face the night when the darkness itself becomes an enemy, stretching long fingers into the very corners of your mind? The answer, as it turns out, is rooted in science. Exposure therapy is a technique commonly used to help people confront and overcome their fears. It's based on a simple, yet profound idea. By gradually and safely exposing oneself to the feared object or situation, the brain begins to adjust, recalibrating the nervous system to stop seeing the fear as an immediate threat. When it comes to darkness, exposure therapy isn't about plunging yourself into pitch-black rooms for hours on end. It's about small, manageable steps, slowly desensitizing the brain to the very stimulus that triggers the fear response. It's a process that takes time, patience, and a willingness to step into the unknown, one small footstep at a time. For those who suffer from intense fear of the dark, the journey begins in familiar settings. It starts with dimming the lights, allowing the darkness to settle gradually. With each step, the brain is recalibrating, learning that the dark doesn't necessarily mean danger, that the absence of light doesn't signal a threat. The room doesn't change when the lights go out. The night doesn't grow teeth. The world remains, quiet still and the same. But with each step toward understanding, a new perspective takes root. The darkness, once a monster, is transformed into something far more neutral, far more manageable. The most fascinating thing about fear is that it isn't always about the external world. More often than not, it's about how we interpret that world. Fear is not an inherent truth. It's a lens, a filter through which we view reality. This lens is shaped by our thoughts, beliefs, and past experiences. It's a psychological construct, just as much as it's a physiological response. When you think of the dark, what do you feel? Do you feel the pit of anxiety in your stomach, the quickening of your breath? Do you see the endless stretch of empty blackness, filled with an infinite number of possibilities, most of them dark, twisted, and terrifying? That's because the amygdala doesn't just respond to the world as it is. It responds to what we expect to happen. If you anticipate danger, your brain will prepare for it, flooding your body with the chemicals necessary to react. But the reality of the dark is often much less frightening than our minds make it out to be. The dark is not inherently a source of danger. It's merely the absence of light, a space where the unknown resides. And yet, in our minds, the unknown has come to represent everything we fear. That's where cognitive reframing comes into play. Reframing is the process of changing how we think about a situation, of replacing negative or irrational thoughts with more rational, balanced ones. When it comes to the dark, this means challenging the deeply ingrained belief that darkness equals danger. It's about confronting the idea that the absence of light equals the presence of threat. When we can view the dark not as a source of fear, but as an opportunity for growth, introspection, and even peace, we begin to dismantle the emotional wall that we've built around it. Darkness no longer becomes a villain. It becomes a neutral space, a place for rest, creativity, and exploration. If you think about it, there's something undeniably beautiful about the dark. It's in the night sky, in the shimmering constellations, in the delicate moonlight that casts long, mysterious shadows on the earth. Darkness is not just a void, it's a canvas, and upon that canvas the stars paint stories. The darkness is where the universe unfolds, revealing its deepest secrets. Think of the last time you looked up at the night sky, how the stars seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It was the darkness that allowed the stars to shine so brightly. Without it, there would be no night sky, no constellation maps, no Milky Way stretching across the heavens. The dark allows us to see the unseen, to glimpse the extraordinary in the ordinary. But darkness isn't just a time for stargazing. It's a time for the mind to wander, for creativity to thrive. In the quiet solitude of night, the imagination stirs. Writers, Poets, artists, all of us, find inspiration in the deep silence of darkness. It's a space where thoughts settle and dreams take flight, where ideas grow and creativity flourishes. Darkness is not just the absence of light, it is the presence of potential. Nature, too, thrives in the dark. It's in the quiet rhythms of the night, in the time of rest and rejuvenation. Creatures sleep, but the world doesn't stop. The night is a part of nature's delicate balance, essential to the life cycle, to the cycles of growth and decay, to the rhythm of all things. And it's not just about what's in the night, it's about what's within us too. Darkness provides a space for introspection, for deep thought, for self-reflection. It is in the quiet of the night that we often find the answers we've been searching for. The world slows, and in that slowing, we catch glimpses of truths that elude us in the hustle and bustle of the day. When the fear fades, what remains is not just darkness, but the potential to grow. The night is no longer an enemy, but a companion. It is the space where we find solace, where we can close our eyes and rest, where we are free to dream, to create, to simply be. The fear of the dark, when understood and confronted, is not something to be vanquished. It's something to be embraced. It's a part of who we are, woven into our very DNA. And yet it is also something we can change, something we can shift and shape. The fear is not the dark itself, but our response to it. And in that shift, we reclaim the night. The dark, when viewed with new eyes, becomes not a void, but a wellspring of possibility. And perhaps in the end, that is the greatest power of all, to see the darkness not as a threat, but as an opportunity for growth, for understanding, and for peace. As you sit in the quiet of the night, the world around you bathed in the soft glow of the moon, there's a peace that settles in your chest. The shadows, once terrifying, are now simply parts of the landscape. The dark is not a threat, it is a companion, a place of rest, of reflection, and of discovery. The fear of the dark will never fully disappear. It's woven into our biology, into our ancient instincts. But perhaps, just perhaps, the more we understand it, the less it controls us. And the more we embrace the beauty of the night, the more we learn to find peace in the very thing that once frightened us most.